you drove by the movie theater here in Topeka at lunchtime on Thursday, you might have seen a strange sight. People had already started to line up in anticipation of the midnight release of the last Harry Potter film. That was, by my calculations, about 12 hours ahead of time, and I felt the heat that day. And the actual premiere was even more of a sight, with young and old dressing up like the beloved characters from the series, laughing and crying with bittersweet feelings about the end of the series. What is it about Harry Potter that has stolen millions of hearts, that has captured the world's imagination? I mean, I feel like they are my friends, that we grew up together. The first book came out when I was 13 years old, almost the same age as the characters. For those of you less familiar with Harry Potter and company, let me rest assure you that these books and these movies are not really about magic, or witches and wizards, or dark magic and spells. I mean, those are elements in the books, but that's not what the series is really about. One of the reasons I own all the books and have read through them repeatedly is because they echo the themes of the Bible, the themes of humanity, family and friendship, love and betrayal, teenage angst, inner turmoil, the search for identity and meaning, self-sacrifice and temptations, fierce loyalty, and above all, the battle of good versus evil. And good versus evil is what we encounter in Matthew's Gospel today. The children of God, where the sun will shine, and the children of Satan. And they're living together as wheat and weeds in a field. Now, wheat is an incredibly useful crop, as I'm sure many of you Kansans know. In addition to being a part of some of my favorite things like pizza, beer, and cookies, the whole grain provides essential nutrients and vitamins and can even be used to feed livestock or thatch roofs. We know about wheat. But do you know just how evil these weeds are? The weed known as darnel is also called false weed or tares. This weed has zero virtues. It sucks up the nutrients and the water that could be used by the productive plants around it. The seeds of the plant, if consumed, can cause everything from hallucinations to death. It was actually a crime under Roman law to plant darnel in someone's field. This is not some harmless, pretty plant. It is a real threat to the existence of the wheat, and consequently the farmer's harvest, and the farmer's lives, and the farmer's family and workers' lives. And the farmer in the parable just lets it grow, unchecked. No weed killer is sprayed. I've become a big fan of that. No backs are broken in the hot sun pulling all those weeds up. This dangerous darnel is allowed to grow and even flourish right next to the useful and productive wheat. And the slaves cannot stand it. Come on, master, what kind of farmer are you? Didn't you plant the good kind of seed? Won't you let us rip it up right now? What kind of farmer would let that evil grow along with the good? Don't you know anything about farming? Isn't that what we cry out to God sometimes? Come on, God, what kind of God are you? Didn't you make all creation, including people, good? Well, won't you let us tend to the evil right now, ripping it out from the roots, killing Osama bin Laden and the Taliban, executing child murderers, eradicating cancer and AIDS and mental illness, and righting it all? What kind of God would let that evil grow unchecked, flourish even, and threaten the existence of good and beauty and truth and righteousness and justice? Don't you know anything about running the world? As the slaves verbally wrestle with the master responds with divine patience and knowledge. Well, if we rip up the weeds now, we might rip out the wheat, and then where will we be? The master knew that despite the eagerness of the slaves, they couldn't really tell good from evil. And what I imagine happens next that's not in the story, I think the slaves sighed, grumbled, and did what they were told. But can you imagine their building frustration in the weeks and months that followed? Every time they went out to that field and watered it or fertilized it or took care of it, they were not only nurturing and fertilizing and weeding and watering the wheat, but they were also doing that to the weeds. Every time they looked at the field, they were reminded of their helplessness and their lack of control. The slaves had to treat every plant alike, and so it seemed like evil had won. I bet at times they just wanted to quit because it just seemed so unfair. But the beauty of grace is that it makes life unfair. And the beauty of this parable is that the slaves didn't make the decision about wheat or weeds. The master did and does. Condemning people to be burned in bundles or even to be a weed in the first place is not our job. Jesus Christ is the judge. But from the beginning of time, we have wanted the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We, in fact, want to be God in our own little worlds, or at least like God. But in reality, we are impatient slaves, called to work in a mixed field. Even my fictional friend Harry Potter tries to sort good from evil, who is on his side of love and who is on the side of evil. I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say he doesn't get it all right. But ultimately, that's not his job. That's not his calling, and it's not our calling either. Our job is to tend the field, to make sure that wheat that grows is as fruitful as possible, that the harvest is as bountiful as we can help make it. On Friday, we traveled to El Salvador, and we are tending the harvest. We are caring for the good seeds that God has planted there, offering our love and support and relationships from you here at Trinity. And we go to meet our brothers and sisters in El Salvador because God has made us a promise. God says to our faith ancestor Jacob, "Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." The master does not abandon the slaves as they work in the field. The master does what she promises. On harvest day, the weeds are separated, evil is no more, and the only thing left is good. So find rest in the promise of God, that whether you are in Topeka, El Salvador, California, or Hogwarts, God is there. Whether you are facing an illness, or the most powerful dark wizard of all time, or just feeling powerless to help a loved one, God is there. And God will not not let evil win the war. God will not let injustice have the final say. God has given us that promise, a promise we remember as we gather around the table, a promise that we will not be abandoned, that God will act in the fullness of time, and that there is nowhere we can go that God has not already been. And until that joyous day comes, join with me as we keep watering and tending to the mixed field. Amen.